this capacity for abstraction is divorced almost completely from embodiment. And that's a good thing, because that allows us to experiment. But it's a bad thing, because actually doing the embodiment turns out to be very difficult. It's like your body's got all these habits built into it that you've been working on for a long time. Here's another piece of advice. Do not practice things that you don't want to become. Because one of the things that happens, let's say you take Danish speakers and you play Danish backwards to them, and you do a scan of brain activities. Like, their brain's lighting up like mad because they don't know how to listen to Danish backwards, so you get a whole bunch of brain involved in a new task. But then as you practice the task and routinize it, less and less brain is involved. So what happens is the activation, this is in your standard right-hand male, and the reason I'm using that as an example, because that's the kind of simplest default brain in a sense. Women are more diffusely organized, and so it's harder to exactly talk about their neurological structure in a simple way. But in a right-handed male, what happens is the activity starts to shift to the left, and then it shifts backwards, and as it does so, the amount of tissue that's activated gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, until you've built a little machine that takes care of that sort of thing. But the thing about that machine is that it's a little machine, it's a habit, and it's actually there, it's built into you. So be careful what you practice, because if you practice it enough, then it becomes, it's like it's you, it's the default you. And then if you want to change it, you can't just undo that stupid machine. It's there permanently. What you have to do is you have to build another little machine that shuts it off. And then another machine that does the other thing. And then if you get stressed, the little machine that shuts the first machine off will stop working, and back your stupid habit will come. So you know, people used to talk about the development of character. And there was something about that that was absolutely right, because character is how you build yourself across time. And it really, really matters. Only practice what you want to become. If you practice other things, well, then you'll become them. So that's not so good. And so what's happened is that your hypothalamus, roughly speaking, is monitoring your internal body state, and it thinks that you need some, maybe you need some salt, but maybe you need some food. And so it's going to start popping up, not a drive. It's not like all of a sudden you're a robot, you're like a popcorn-seeking robot, and you're laying out your chained together, conditioned popcorn making and eating routines. That isn't what happens. What happens instead is that you start to envision a new state of being. And that state of being has a goal, which is you eating some popcorn. And it has you where you are, which is in an insufficient state of popcorn. And then what's happening as well is that the motor processes that you would use to implement that are also disinhibited. They're there. You already know how to do it. They get disinhibited. So, or you could think of them as getting primed. They're not. They're getting disinhibited. But you can think of it as being primed. And at some point, that becomes overwhelming enough, say pressure from the hypothalamus, which is really what's bloody well in control. It says, yeah, enough, like internet surfing, off to the popcorn. And so you leap up, and then what do? You reorient the way you're looking at the world. Everything in the world becomes low resolution, or even zero, except those few things that are relevant to your new quest. Down the stairs you go, you find the right pan, you find the popcorn, getting irritated if you can't find it, right? Because now, you see, it's interesting because your emotions align along your goals. As long as you're pursuing a beeline to your goal, and everything's laying itself out, not as you expect, but as you want, then your emotions stay positive. But as soon as something deviates, then you're irritated. And the reason for that is that, like, let's say you can't find the popcorn pan. Well, your brain is computing, well, something like this. This is obviously not how it works, but it's an X amount of energy and matter from popcorn means it has X value. If you expend a whole bunch of energy running around in your clueless state trying to acquire popcorn, you can easily get to the point where you've expended more energy and time than the popcorn delivers. And if you do that for a month, then you die. So it's perfectly reasonable for you to get irritated when the path length to your destination increases radically. And you might get even more irritated if you can't find any popcorn. And then it's like, oh no, I have to dispense with the popcorn micro-personality, and it's all irritated because, you know, it's sort of alive. It's irritated that you have to squash it. And then you have to come up with, well, maybe I could have a peanut butter sandwich. You know, and pop, up comes a new little micro-personality that orients itself towards the goal. And so all the time you're doing that. You're always in a motivated state. Now, it's not a drive, because it's not deterministic, but it does have a behavioral element. You have all these Piagetian subroutines that are stored in your body, you know, all your body capacity, all your skills, and you know which set of those you're likely to use if you're going to do X thing, and so those get prepared. And then your perceptions reorient towards the new goal. It's like a hunting goal. You're fixated on it. And then your emotions orient along that. So as long as things are going well, you're happy, you're hopeful, things are proceeding, that's positive emotion, that's dopaminergically mediated. And if things aren't going well, then it's either, well, it's any amount of negative emotion from mild irritation to like full-blown temper tantrum. So that's, and you're, okay, now that's the simple story. The complex story is, okay, you're hungry, you're thirsty, you're tired, you're hot, you're cold, you're lonely, you need to play. Okay, so let's say you've got, for the sake of argument, let's say you have 8 fundamental motivational systems. Now, who cares how many? It's a finite set. It's under 20. Depends on whether you include anger. Is anger motivation or emotion? Is pain motivation or emotion? We don't care, because they're not formal categories. So, anyways, there's a set number of them. And then, so they have to run to satiation. And so what satiation means is they set up an end state, you perform the routines, you achieve the end state, the system shuts down. It's satiated. Now you'll experience that as satisfaction, not as pleasure. Now you think, well, what's the difference? It's tight. It's complicated. But it's important. The kind of positive emotion that people really like is associated with the search and the hope, not with the acquiring. Because what happens when you acquire is, well, you're no longer in this state, which, you know, has an impulse to action in it. But that's exciting, that's fun, you know, you're on the track of something. It's like you're alive while you're searching for something. Well, then you find it. It's like, good, you need to find it. But then the whole thing disappears and you're sitting there thinking, well, I've just graduated. Now what? Right? Because that's what will happen when you graduate. It's like, hey, you're a student. You've got status. You've got a hierarchy of values. You've got a way of orienting yourself in the world, and you have an identity. It's like, so you're in there, and everybody's happy about it. So then one day you graduate. It's like success. It's, well, really? It's like, poof, that's gone. And the next thing you know, you're like handing out coffee at the local Starbucks. Yeah. So well, you know, you get the point. You've experienced this all the time in your life. You hit a pinnacle. You've attained something, but the problem is that now what? You have to conjure up a whole new you. So some of it is satisfying, you've accomplished the goal, but some of it's just a big pain in the neck. It's like, uh-oh, student me has disappeared, and now it's frantically searching for employment me. And that me doesn't have the status, and it is in a space of much more radical uncertainty.